working with...
Daffy, he's an asshole. Bugs, on the other hand, he's actually a really solid guy. Cool, yeah, it's all good.
I just answer anyone's question they might have off the bat. Because I'm thrilled to have you. I saw your hand first. What's your name?
So, do you have any advice?
Thank you, it's a good question. So he's asking for advice about how to deal with actors. Which is a fair question. The answer is have courage. And I mean that. Be brave. You can't really be brave unless you have some sort of edge that you're pressing up against. I don't want to call it a fear necessarily, but an obstacle. Have courage, because you're going to be met with many challenges, and just count on that. Know that you're confident in what you know how to do. Make sure that not just the first voice in the room, or the loudest voice, or the voice that speaks as many words as can be spoken as quickly as possible, strung together in a sentence and make them off a stream of thought, but whoever the speaker is so-and-so's superior to you. Just remember, listen to it all, but remember what the answer is.
Oh, another thing, Mike, actors are notoriously lazy and they like to have new ideas all the time. You know, so make sure you keep them, you know, where's the squeaky monkey? You like that. Thanks, Rick.
You work with very big directors, right? You work with yeah. My question is, what traits do you look for in directors? Or you want to work with them again?
Work with them again?
Yeah, work with them.
What traits do I look for in directors to want to work with them? I think they should care about what they're doing. And not all of them are. But those who really have come to a place where you're given the task or the privilege to bring a story to the screen and everything from soup to nuts that goes on in between is a tall order. A director is, in the best sense of the word, and I'm going to steal this answer from a good friend of mine who I think put it to me best. The director is someone who just says, it's over there. Just go there. I shall direct you there. Ian McKellen told me that. Ian McKellen also told me, darling, are you not going to wear a towel for our scene this afternoon? And then Mike, the producers, got in on it, and then agents, and the contract language. And yeah, in the end, I got away with wearing a towel, sorry. Gods and Monsters, go look it up later. Next! What am I saying? You watched George in the Jungle. I was running around a butt fog for the whole Where's Ross? What you got? You know what? I'm going to go with, what just came to mind right now was the very first day I had the privilege of being on an actual functioning real movie set. I was first year out of college. I'd done an internship. I was in Seattle, Washington, where my family lived, and I had gone to a four-year program at a place called Cornish College. Also very good, and after talking to Ross about what you guys are doing there, they're to speak with what you're on par. Like, it's the Northwest, or you're down south, you know, that other place. New York. I got cast as sailor number 1. Not that movie. In a film called Dogfight. It was directed by Nancy Savoca. It was with River Phoenix and Lily. I just called her. Thank you. I was just blanking her last name. Like I said, it was my first day at work, and I got my union card out of that job. There's something called the Taft-Hartley law that I learned about. In a way, you get a waiver so you can go through and union, and you're allowed to get their dues. And that wasn't so important to me so much as I couldn't believe that I'm actually at the show, and I'm in it. But the astonishing thing that happens is you may have all the book knowledge, and you may have treaded these boards all through your school or college days and amateur theatrics, and people tell you those aren't important. They are very important. And when you step out and it's time for you to perform, all of the flop sweats, all of that fear, everything, it'll just roll away because you're trained, you know what you're doing. You're automatic about it. And if you're not, then you find out right there and then that this is not for you. Someone doesn't just flat out tell you. But the most exciting day was when I finished working then. The scene was simple enough. A band of 4 Marines are out on a night before they ship out to Vietnam, and they make this diabolical pact amongst each other who can bring home or a date. What do they call it? You want to see this movie? You know, the dog, or it's awful, but anyway, it's an awful guys, really guys. And the Marines encounter some sailors in an arcade, and fire and ice, oil and water, they throw down, and there's a bit of a rumble, and that was the scene. So they shaved my head, they gave me a white costume, 3 or 4 other guys in the same outfit as me. It was a fight scene all of a sudden. It didn't say that really on the page so much, but I was ready for it. I got thrown into an antique pinball machine. It didn't break, but my rib cracked. Hey, I got an extra $50 out of it, so $50. And I was happy. They called for lunch. There was so much food under that tent, man. I couldn't believe it. You guys do this all the time? Then the day was over. I remember every cable I tripped on. I remember the cinematographers. I remember the experience of meeting River. He was a really, really down-to-earth guy. Albeit he was him at 19. Sadly, we all know what it came to pass a few years later. I felt very sad. I won't pretend to have been his friend or anything, but I do have a diary somewhere that has a yellow sticky note in it. It says River, and there's a phone number in Florida. I never had the courage to call it. I guess another thing is, when you say have courage, Michael, yeah, have the courage to call the number. It was a great day. And it was when I knew, this is what I'm gonna do. This is, I mean, yeah, I got a degree in my back pocket. Score. You gotta pay for it now. Ugh. How am I gonna do that? Well, there's not enough cars in the world to wash to pay for that one. But I made sure that I didn't sell myself down the river, and I didn't listen to that voice that says, no, you can't, no, get up, why? Go home, forget it. It's hard to get rid of that voice, which, by the way, will always be there in some way or another. I still think someone's gonna walk over and hand me a dish towel and say, Fraser, get your ass back in the pit, right? Scrub up. We're gonna get slammed by dinner breaks coming up, you know? It's always there, and it's good to have that, because it keeps you motivated. Another thing, Mike, stay motivated. And if you have to do the dishes every now and then, just do the dishes. That was the best day. And then, one more thing. And then beyond that, I've been on a lot of film sets since then. I can't say that I remember as much. then, afterwards, as I do from when it was so fresh, so new, and validating to be a part of.
You were talking earlier about how things are written on the page and what's on the page is what you need. Yeah, you can write the words on the page in the dialogue section, but you can't. You got to know how to pronounce those words. You got to know the inflections. You got to know the lingo to the point where you're conversational in it as if you're in the 50s. So, did you prepare for that in any way? Did you already know these things from watching other movies? Did you talk to your parents?
I became astronomically lucky to have stumbled onto a really well-written screenplay, which I firmly believe is the basis of, you got to start somewhere. You give your house a good foundation for a reason, and crumble. You want screenplay's got to be solid. And they're not always, and they get rewritten, etc. But that was a solid, good 3-act structure. It didn't hurt that Sissy Spacek and Christopher Walken were in it, and you pinch yourself because that's Sissy Spacek, Christopher Walken. I'm doing this. Alicia Silverstone was great, funny, late but funny, really nice. Tardiness might have been an issue. And insofar as the period goes, are there any designers in the house here? Anyone who see design? Okay, you'll meet some one day who is a designer, and you'll say, "What do you do?" And they'll say, "I do movies." And you wonder, what does that job entail? Well, create the world, the environment that you're in. Our director had done a really great movie prior to that called Guarding Tess with Shirley MacLaine. And he grew up in the 50s. It's a period that was near and dear to him that he loved. And he had a very, very simple creed for that movie. And in particular, Blast from the Past was, in essence, it was about the chivalry's not finished. It's not done yet. We can live in a very cynical world. We all know that. We're good at cynicism, aren't we? Way too good at it. But when someone as enthusiastic and unaffected because they lived in a bomb shelter for the first 35 years of their life, hasn't been exposed to the modern world and all its sound and fury around us, comes into it, what can happen? And he explored all those possibilities by really taking the notion of the naif, the babe in the woods, the first time you do something may very well be the last time also. That was the spirit of it. And as I say that out loud, I think of the number of times that I've come back to that dynamic and character work that I've been asked to be a part of. I know that it happened for me in a film that I first did called School Ties. I know that that was a kid who was from somewhere else and you had to integrate into a new world. It happened in Encino Man. That was a guy who was from out of town too. But he's just trying to fit in. You go down the line, for me that's something I guess I found a hook in many ways. Now that I think I got about another good 25 years of me doing this. Stay healthy. Oh, that's another thing, Mike. Go to the dentist. You want to be able to keep eating. You get a shot at being an old happy man. Thanks for asking me about that movie. I really had a great time doing that. Who's up? And lovely lady in the middle. Hi.
So, when you do back in action is one more. And I was just wondering, how was it working with
Daffy, he's an asshole. Bugs, on the other hand, he's actually a really solid guy. Cool, yeah, it's all good. Daffy's got to make the whole thing about himself all the time, ripping the pages out. I still have bragging rights to say it. I worked with Bugs and Daffy. Although my kids don't know who they are. I'm old.
was just wondering, there's a scene in which he's actually grab, I think, inside of Daphne and Bugs Bunny. And I was just always curious, like as a kid, how that felt to do, I guess.
That's fair. It's a very good, and again, it gets back to, you know, you're asking me about that. In that case, I had worked with, I'll tell you, you meet the most interesting people, specialists in areas you didn't know could exist in the world of making films. There's a puppeteer, and he's a friend of mine, his name is Bruce Lanoyle, and he's brilliant. I mean, like, he could work, I think he did. Like, for instance, the guys who were behind the suits and you know, animatronics and like the gorillas in George of the Jungle. Those were really fit performers who were in specialized suits that were worked with, you know, radio-controlled animatronic stuff from Jim Henson's Creature Shop. You know, you can geek out on this stuff all afternoon if you want, but it's still pretty awesome. And still, in Looney Tunes, it depends on what the shot was. Sometimes, like, for instance, Daffy, who's an asshole. I mean, if he showed up, he wouldn't like having lunch with Alicia or whatever. Dear Reddit. Oh, I'm gonna get so trolled. Sometimes Daffy was a shot bag, like he was full of beans. He was a bag full of beans to put some heft or some weight to your arm, so it looks like you're physically carrying an object. Sometimes there's a piece of tape on the wall. Sometimes it was Bruce Lanoyle, the puppeteer, who was always doing Daffy's voice, and sometimes it was an actual physical stuffy that they would use to line up the shot with, as if it was an actor. Although it ate less, clearly, because it was a puppet. That movie was just really, again, it was one big airball of acting. You know, it ain't there, you gotta believe it is. It's really important, just technically speaking, where are you? Is to get your eye line correct. Because there's a big difference. Like right now, I'm looking at the tip of that microphone right there. Okay. Now there's a difference between looking at that microphone there, that's a monster, that's a creature, animated thing, or whatever, and looking away, it's not there to shoot it because they'll track it, and later, and looking at it again, and getting it all wrong. Which is a problem. Then, maybe less so now, because we've advanced the technology. The advance of technology is yes, we have advanced the technology. The actors don't suck any longer. Allow me to give you a demonstration, or a better example. Okay, so it's George of the Jungle, and George is introducing his pet dog, Shep, who is played by Ty, the elephant. Stay with me. Who's a consummate professional, by the way. And the shot design was, the joke is, in the world of the movie, that George's pet dog is actually an elephant. So the challenge was for Disney to put together a convincible, articulating elephant on screen that behaves like a hyperactive Labrador. And you know, they did it because they can, because they're Disney and computers and all that, but still, they needed a performance to make it sell for everything around it. But the actual creation of it, now this was 1990, help me, something, right? 8, 7? You know better than I do, right? Anyway, a long time ago, back in the Stone Ages. And I remember I was standing, they were lining the shot up, they brought in Ty, who's the elephant playing chef. And there was a whole row of people I didn't know that came in for that morning's work who had like music stands and laptops on them and more important looking gizmos than I had seen before. And everyone was very serious. And I worked with the elephant, and you think you get along with it and all that, and you do because it's a good elephant. And you know, he's comfortable enough for me to reach up and scratch him behind the ear. And the shot said, stroke him down the trunk. And George said, introduces the line is, we're Doggy Shep or something like that. And so I stroked his trunk, and it was that simple. That was the shot, pretty much. Of course, embellishing. Oh, that's another thing, Michael. Yeah. Keep the actors on the page. Don't let them go off on. Don't hire an actor with a tangential personality. No, do. So I'm stroking the elephant's trunk, and I reached up to scratch. You can scratch a dog behind the ear because it's a dog, and it did that. But as I did that and raised, everyone gasped and freaked out and started buzzing and having meetings with each other. And I thought I don't know, I pressed the red button or something. Like, what happened? And one of them very diplomatically came over to me and said, "No, you can't raise your arm to scratch him behind the ear." And you know, my precious art history wanted to plead the case about you would scratch your dog behind the ear, wouldn't you? And I learned at that point, just keep your mouth shut. Because had I raised my arm above the picture plane in their design past the elephant's eye to reach across that, it was, okay, $50,000 stroking the trunk, $180,000 scratching behind the ear. That was then. This is now. Today's like, who needs an elephant? Just walk it into the room. You can do what you want. The tango with it, if you please. I mean, we'll just put it in later. $50. Why was I telling you this anecdote? Because I'm holding the microphone. Oh, Michael, another thing? Yeah, just because you have a microphone and a captive audience doesn't mean you know everything. Thanks. Anyone else? Hi, way in the back of the room.
You kind of touched on it earlier. I started off in film and stunts and progressively moved into acting and found out how depressing acting can be. In the harder times, is there a quote that kind of kept strong with you and pushed you through against rough waters?
Yeah, like I said earlier, and I mean it again, have courage. You got it. It's scary shit. It's scary to do this. Or to declare that you want to. This will be my life's work. It's not just declaring a major, you know, I'm speaking to students, presumably. That's huge. There's a huge thing in your life to make, but to make a choice to stick with it. Now, you said you came to it through performing stunts and writing and then shows acting along the way. Have you really made up your mind? You don't have to answer it now, but I mean, ask yourself that question. Also, make sure that if you hear that voice of dissent that we all have that says distance yourself from either the tiger that is chasing you or the choice you're going to make professionally, listen to it. If you trust your gut, normally it's correct, and ask yourself if it's about doing acting, which is really what you want to do, or is it about the idea of being an actor and then doing it? I'm glad that's an honest question. Thank you for asking that. Thank you. Clap for yourself. So you're asking like, what's important when bonding when you're working with children?
Yeah, like
What?
you show.
Just don't. Hey, Michael, look up W.C. Fields. I'm goofing. You're cute. Go ahead. I want to know, what's it like, what do you mean, to work with kids and you know, and not come off as like, I'm your dad, because it says so.
Talking to with Alex, you always showed really, really fatherly, believable connection. Like I just be like, hey, that is actually that kid's dad. How are you able to create something so believable?
Thank you. My kids thank you. Hi, YouTube. It's gonna. Just kidding. If we're using the Alex in The Mummy Returns, he's a great kid and a fine young actor at that time. I was a teenager, like your age now. What can I say other than don't suck? Do your job really. like commit to it. And it's a little bit weird because you shouldn't necessarily have to draw on your life experiences to play a role accurately or authentically. And I think, in other words, I didn't have to have a 12, 11-year-old son at a time in my life where I didn't even have kids at that point in my life. But it was important. I understood seriously what it was like to be a 12 or 11-year-old. I think that guy probably showed up here today to talk to you as I say this out loud. Now, I think that with kids and actors is that you don't overcompensate by putting like air quotations around the choices you make, the way that you interact with them. Treat them as, per se, adults, but you let them know, and it's a real cool thing for a kid to work in a film or a play or something like that, because they really want to belong. Acting's all about wanting to belong. Filmmaking is about wanting to be with the people who are doing the thing that's really cool and awesome that everyone else sees too, and they approve of it and they want to see more. You want to belong to part of that. And that want and that need is something you have to stay in touch with, because it won't leave you alone. This is the thing that will keep you going forward and making more choices. Because, where was he? Hey, Michael, where's the courage guy? Oh, you are the courage guy. Have courage. You have to have courage. That, and make sure the kid has like well-defined curfew, and his mom is there too. And it helps to find out what they like. I remember that kid was into some action figure called Action Man. So we played with Action Men when no one was making us work, chasing around after mummies that weren't there. You got kids? One happy day, many blessings on you. Who else wants to know what to talk about? Hi, how are you?
I'm sorry, but I'm the mother of an inspiring actor, filmmaker.
Xavier, how are you? Anyone know Xavier? Why is Mom putting me on the spot?
Going back to the mummy, of course, because I know everybody here just loves it, right?
Yeah. Hey, it worked once, so we made it again. Did I say that? What do you want to know?
Well, loving the mummy, loving the chemistry between Rick and Stevie. I mean, fell in love with that chemistry. It's contagious and just mesmerizing, and I don't know, call me romantic, but I just
Romantic.
love it.
She's over here.
You did say you've got another 25 years under your belt. Can you expect to see that chemistry again?
I'm hopeful. I know that this is what I want to do. I'm waiting for the guy at the dish rack to show up anytime. And I am motivated. And speaking of talent, sometimes when you feel like you've thrown it in, you're like, why am I doing this? It hurts just as much when I'm banging my head against the wall as when I am not banging it against the wall. Stated force. Okay, first of all, child actor. Get your hands and fingernails dirty in the garden of creative opportunities that you can, that makes sense. Be a part of that school play. At your local theater, go out and get good and freaking scared, auditioning for something. It's a form of torture. Unnecessary, but nonetheless, it does help everyone decide if or not they belong. And if you can go through that, you can weather some dejection and take pride in the small accomplishments. Just know that if you want to do it, you will. If it's something that you feel like you want to because there's a fantasy surrounding what you think it's like to do that, it's different. You're such a nice house. I'm so glad you're here. I think I have something to say that's amusing, but I want you to know that there will come times when it's a job that makes you feel like it's a job. You're doing heavy lifting. You don't remember what it's like. You're not toiling for it. You don't remember that first day at work when you
feel like you got made, you got a stripe, you got the card, you're in. You're not called aspiring any longer. You are. Whatever it takes to find that day, find your way to that day, do it. And have courage. Good luck, sweetie. How are you? Teal shirt.
My name's Steve.
Hey, dude.
We were talking about auditions. What were audition experiences like for you?
Well, like I said, torture. It depends. When you're beginning your career, yeah, you must audition. And then maybe you get comfortable in your career, you're asked to audition, and you are insulted, like I tell you. You offer me work, you don't ask me to prove my worth, do you? Yeah, you're always proving your worth no matter what. Somewhere between acting and cut. You better be good at it, or else you won't wind up on the screen. I'll cut around you, dude. Auditions. Necessary evil, but I will tell you one thing that I know is absolutely certain, is that anyone who's watching you audition, casting director, whatever's on the other end of the devices you're pointing at me right now, I mean, you're being judged, you're being evaluated, call it what you want. What you do and how well or not, or whatever they're looking for, is being parsed apart. But it's hard for you to know when you're on the spot, as it were, is that the folks behind those cameras making all the decisions, they absolutely desperately want you to be good at what you do. They really want you to be the guy or the girl who walks in the door and nails it, who just is, who just becomes. You don't have to act, because you are. That happens occasionally, but they want to be satisfied. So that, I tell you this because the ratio of good audition experience to one that's not successful is probably, 1 to pretty high. And you can't get discouraged if this is what you're really there for. Don't walk away from this stuff if it's because your audition is off or you think your technique is wrong. It's nonsense. Forget it. The best that I've ever felt I've done has always been the one that got away. Seriously. When you start getting confident, oh, I nailed that, I became, I was, all that nonsense I just said a second ago, that, you're working too hard. When you go in and you give the performance that isn't over-enunciated and affected, that's accessible, that puts apart this diabolical system of choosing between who will advance and who will not advance, is a really tricky way to get hired, but necessary. Just make sure you don't give up too early in the game. Stick it out. It's worth it. Oh, some practical things. Mike? Make sure you have a car that works. Some way to put gas in it. Get a credit card and then you do it, all that we have to. Make sure you're mobile in the sense that you can go places, you're young, you're healthy, you got wits about you, you pick up and go. You have work, you will travel. And you kind of have to live that way for some time. I did it for 20 years. And it can be lonely living out of a suitcase and stuff like that. And I just knew the name of the city at some points because I opened up the room service menu to look for the club sandwich, like, ooh, Cincinnati club sandwich, that's where I am, like, it happens, it can be a bit dizzying. But I guess what I want to say is, honestly, I feel you. I know what it's like to be on the other side. And I do know that for the times that I was, whoever walked in the door, that you're going to get a little test, and it is. The ones who stood apart, the ones who were in the conversation, who were front runners for whatever the job was, were the ones who really didn't have
that anxiety of, I shouldn't be here, I want to bolt for the door, and you do, you really do, but you just have to have the confidence. Another thing, and I'll let this one go, don't ever give up on learning, because you're going to be learning on the job as you go along for all your days in your career, because everything is going to be mercurial. It changes all the time. The rules, the technology, the audience interest, the type of films that are going to be made. I can remember when all the craze in Hollywood was Viking movies. Viking movies. I mean, I love Viking movies, but there was like 13 Viking movies in production around there at one time because one of them made money, so do it again. Make another mummy movie. Do it again. I have bills to pay. I'll come back. Read it. Back there, how are you? I see you. Yes, you're in the show.
Thank you, Rich. My favorite movie growing up, one of them was Bedazzled. I know it's weird, but I wanted to ask you, what was it like working on that movie since you essentially had to play 7 different characters?
First of all, the late Harold Ramis is a genius. And a privilege for that. He came to me to play a guy who made a Faustian bargain and asked to incorporate 7 or actually 8. One of them, storylines got cut. It was too hot for the studio. They didn't like rock and roll or something. I was Lincoln instead. It was weird. But it's another story. But, what was it like doing? I mean, it was like. I had 19 answers, and I'm up at the butterfly net. My mind is just swiping at them. Has anyone seen Gods and Monsters? Okay, thanks. In the world of that film, James Whale actually answers that question, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, but he did talk about, he's musing about his life. He was a director, for those of you who haven't, who's been set up to pastor, essentially, and he talks about how wonderful making a movie is. You're with friends, you're telling stories, you're really advancing the culture. That, you feel like you're a part of that. That feeling of being a part of it and belonging on Bedazzled was a privilege. It was. And to do 7 different storylines, but still try and find a way to keep that guy Elliot in the middle of it was the challenge. And I learned that don't do comedy. Because once you think you're funny, you are not, dude. Sorry, Vale. Comedy works best when it's deadly serious. I learned, those are the rules. I mean, you can take that idea to the bank when you're writing your screenplays and directing whoever is up there. There were times that I felt that doing something like that was challenging because it was all about makeup, which was brilliant. I didn't really know what my character would be when Elliot is turned into a 9-foot basketball player with the intelligence quotient of room temperature, but nothing but skills. For those of you who've seen the movie, there's a twist in the locker room. Oh dear, don't go there. Look, it was great fun. Harold Ramis, the director, was a great guy. He had a vision for that movie that stays with me. He was a self-proclaimed practicing Buddhist. He believed that this wasn't the story of a guy who had made a pact with the devil to improve his quality of life, more so, but it was the journey that he had to take towards enlightenment. And the movie's punctuated at the very end, in a really fancy shot in San Francisco Bay, I think it was, tracking in and time lapse, it's great. And then you watch, and suddenly a man in an orange robe walks into the frame.
just as the credits are about to roll. And you start to wonder if when the devil, Elizabeth Hurley, thank you. Yeah, her. Easy on the eyes, I guess. Who, by the way, does needlepoint in between tape. Needlepoint. What I wanted to say was, when the God character meets the devil, you kind of start wondering if the two of them were colluding, if they were working together on this guy's behalf to try and embolden and better his life. But the real answer is he had to do it himself. And the music at the end of it is, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Change yourself. Change your mind. Change your mind. That one. Yeah. You want to be change your mind. I know. Oh, you're a geek. I love you too. Do you have a question for me? Okay, now put it with a question mark. You love movies, I take it, right?
Yes, he asked the exact question I wanted to ask, was about how you play so many characters and how that was for you while still trying to improve English now get coach.
You get a lot of help, like I started espousing earlier. Make sure that all departments are in on the job. In a movie that's structured like that. And you know, it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. Like, I threw this away, but at one point, Elliot decides he wants to be really cool and bad, and the devil says, well, you know, bad boys get all the action. Well, worse, actually, she said, why don't you be a bad boy? He went, yeah, I want to be bad. And he became a rock star, and we filled a stadium and did a whole like crazy alt-rock show with British bad accents, mosh pit diving and face planting and all of this, and destroying all the cliches apply, and destroying hotel rooms. Ask the staff at the Encanada. Apparently, Def Leppard was here a couple of years ago. I can still see the stains in the carpet. But, really, but you go, oh, a girl like that. Well, we did do that, and the studio went, no, this isn't a Fox movie. This isn't really what we're about. I can't make this up. You're watching, and it's true. And I said, we got to come up with something else. And so, for that reason, the wheel turned, and I was Lincoln going to the theater. That was their alternate. Maybe that's not what I wanted to be doing, but neither or it wasn't my film. But you know what? I can remember fighting that tooth and nail as best I could. And maybe you can help shed some light on this one. I don't know if I agree with it or not, but when I was saying, hey, look, we got to keep the sequence in. I want to do it. I'm not going to hold anyone hostage. She said, no, I'm not going to come back and act and do it. Another, Lincoln, you're not. What was I told? I was told, when 10 Russians tell you you're drunk, you lie down. Now as I say that out loud, that has a completely different meaning. I think what the meaning behind that was, we all know better than you, and we're going to protect you from yourself, because they're Russians. It might be something to do with drinking. I don't know. But, you're going to encounter a lot of different ideas. There'll be a lot of power play going on in your careers. Choose your battles is what I took away from that, and stick to it. And you usually only kind of get one pass. You gotta figure out which one's important to you and when to use it. And then maybe you'll get back down and ask to come back again.
Did you ever eat that Big Mac and Coke?
Oh, and George?
No, in Bedazzled, your first choice was a Big Mac and a Coke.
No, I did not. I thought I asked George. I did not. I'm sorry, I didn't. It wasn't my body and temple. Get to know me. I can remember though, and if I can just say about corporate sponsorship and being strong-armed into it sometimes, if you watch the movie George of the Jungle, there's one part where George goes to San Francisco. And what else do you do in San Francisco but run around and ride on top of
cable cars. So it's on a cable car, and for some reason or another, they're like, one of their product placements was McDonald's. I was like, they wrote a whole scene where George ran into the McDonald's and basically ordered a Big Mac and fries. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Come on. Like, it's like, you're asking me to do a commercial for McDonald's, and that was, and they cut it out and like, okay, I'll compromise. And then I remember someone told me, Brendan, what? You don't have to like it. And I went, oh. So there's George, if you watch the movie, on top of the cable car, and the cable car takes off, and subversively I threw myself backwards in a slapstick moment and kicked the hamburger out of the air instead of biting into it. And then cut away to wherever George gets up to next. I think we held up the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that, which we really did do. Sometimes you get to do funny stuff in movies, like nutty. May I? You want to hear about the Golden Gate Bridge? Okay, so we're in San Francisco, and there it is, wherever we're looking, inside of the Golden Gate Bridge. Michael, location. And I'm watching TV, and away you get called to go to work. I don't know where the set is. There, you get in a van, they'll take you to it. And I'm like, open the window, I'm pinching myself, like, wow, I can't believe I'm in this movie. And there's a Golden Gate Bridge outside my trailer door, and I'm looking on TV, and I had the TV on. It was Oprah was on. And I was like, watching Oprah. There's the Golden Gate Bridge. And I'm watching the news. What happened? Where'd Oprah go? They got in. They interrupted Oprah to report that there was a man hanging from a parachute that was tangled in the uprights on the San Francisco Bridge, on the Golden Gate. And it caused a traffic snarl, and people really thought that there was some incident. Well, of course they would think that. There was a dummy of a parachutist that got tangled up, and they were doing a stunt that was, permitted and sanctioned by the film department in San Francisco and all that, but I think they forgot to just tell the public. Man, if people were asking, what's this movie called? I'm like, this movie is called The Guy Who Wasn't There. I didn't have anything to do with that. Oh my goodness. I think my point being is that if you make movies, sometimes you're going to find yourself in those astronomically unbelievable situations, and it's just normal. You kind of have to accept that. And movies are powerful enough to even interrupt Oprah. Who really wants to ask a question? Who's like, you do it, yeah, it's you. It's all you, man.
Okay. I absolutely love a lot of your movies, like The Mummy, Mummy 2.
I totally hated the other ones.
Didn't come and see you. But I think my favorite role I've seen you in well, it was in the middle of the night, I was watching shows, and I skimmed through a bunch of channels, and I find a movie, and you're impersonating Elvis.
Oh, you saw it.
Yeah.
Pawn Shop Chronicles.
Yeah, and I saw it, and I absolutely loved your acting in it. It was very, I don't know, I'm bad at describing it. But,
Thank you. That's nice.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Everyone has an inner Elvis. Come on, admit it.
Yeah, and how did you really act out that role and do so well with it? And how did you feel going to a more independent sort of film after doing such more bigger films before that?
Fair question.
In that case, Pawn Shop Chronicles, I don't know if anyone's seen it, it came and went. That's what happens in independent films, or I don't know if they're independent from these days anymore. Like I started saying, you want to make a movie, you can. There's so many different ways to put it out there. In Pawn Shop Chronicles, that guy wore a jeweled Phoenix Rising, the iconic, I think it was the Aloha Tour jumpsuit that Elvis was rocking, is that right? And that's that piece of wardrobe. It was such a low-budget movie that it got pulled from stock, which means, all the costumes and stuff like that get stored in huge warehouses, and I don't know where. to Area 50 or 49 or whatever. The stuff's out there, and you know, you can't afford to build stuff because it's expensive. You know, clothing people, and you pull from stock, and someone pulled the Elvis suit from stock and said, "Here, try this on." I put it on. Oh God, it's painful because it was bejeweled. But the grommets inside were. Okay, I had to wear Band-Aids on my nipples. I said it. Happy? So I based my performance on being an irritated performer as an irritated performer. I should also mention that in the back on a label, it said, "Kirk Douglas." He did a movie of the week in the late 80s, I think. I don't know. Someone look it up quick. Ask Professor Google. Thanks. The difference between working on an independent film and a big one like that, in terms of what you got to give, is really different. You really got to commit to it, or no one will buy it, and it won't get you far fast. But you'll learn a lot more when everyone knows that we're all in this together. You do some for love, you do some for money. I mean, you should be happy that you're welcome to the party at all, is what happens there. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Now I just gotta get invited to parties.
That I cannot help you. Who's up? Oh, yeah, you were so patient. Go ahead.
First off, sir, I want to say thank you for being here. And, I've been a huge fan of yours for a very, very long time. I would like to ask you, this has always been on my mind for the longest time. Spit it out. In George of the Jungle, were you swinging on most of the vines? Was that you hitting the tree? All the lyrics and everything like that. Was that really you? Just like bang right into the tree?
I have a few scars that prove that. Great, there was a stunt team. There's always, like, every time you do that stuff, you don't do the really huge, like, ginormous stunts at the top of the show. I always leave it till the last week. Yes, because if you bite it at the top of the show, the rest of the movie, but if you bite it at the end, that's oh so sad. Was there film on the camera? Did you get the take? Is he dead? That's sad.
All right. I actually take the week off every time the movie was released. I took the whole week off.
Thank you.
So my question to you is all the movies you've done, all the cities you've been to, all the cities you've been on, what would you pick?
My very favorite.
Hey, Michael, what you gotta do is, you gotta get a favorite part of everything you do. Because a little bit of, every movie, every project has a favorite part of that.
My favorite, like I said earlier, probably would have been when I was faculty at aspirational and waiting to work at the top of my career when I was 20 years old. 19, 20. That's what I look back with a feeling of hope and just feeling like, I get to do this. I know where I'm going. Now just take care of yourself and don't suck. Get good at it. Do your best. My favorite part? Well, there's a screening happening tonight of a film I did called The Quiet American. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it. It's not a very frequently seen film, but it's I don't know how much time we got left. We good? Okay, let me just tell you about The Quiet American really quick. And you're all a filmmakers, so you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so I was doing The Mummy Returns. I was in England, I was in London, and I got a phone call from the director, Philip Noyce, who was shooting a movie called Rabbit Proof Fence in Australia. Like, back in those days, it was like if you got a call on a cell phone, it was like a miracle that it worked. But apparently, he was talking on a satellite hookup, that remote. See Rabbit Proof Fence, Michael. Anyway, he called and said, Philip Noyce, who's just an albatross of a personality, and it's not, you don't want to dine with him. He will knock things over on the table. When he gesticulates, when he speaks, he's that passionate. And working with him is like having a Spitfire history quiz all the time. And he wore a T-shirt that said "Fear no art," to give you an idea. And he's Australian on top of it. Big guy. And you want that kind of personality to go and tackle something that, for instance, Graham Greene, the novelist, had written in 1955. To get a call from Philip to say, hey, do you want to do this? The adaptation was by Christopher Hampton. Christopher Hampton is a living treasure of a playwright and screenplay writer. For the screen, your go-to will be Dangerous Liaisons, Dangerous Liaisons. To be a part of that movie, which essentially is, even in the title, The Quiet American, was decided upon because the film is not overtly critical of specifically American foreign policy, but it's not a real big fan of colonialism. It's a way of our world. And it's set in the early 50s, 52, 53. Indochina is the name for Vietnam. I think the French have been there for some odd 100 years, as it being one of their colonies. The Second World War had happened, amends being made worldwide, among them, the French forces that occupied Indochina, as it was known then, were backing away from it. They were getting out. They didn't want to fight the war anymore. And the Americans were arriving, saying, hey, wait, hang on, let's talk about this. Maybe we can help. Maybe we can give some aid. Watch the movie. Guerrilla forces get funded mysteriously. The mission goes off horribly. He goes off. In the end, he was the novel was titled The Quiet American, and when the novelist Graham Greene was asked why it's called that, according to Philip, he famously replied, it's called The Quiet American because he's dead. That's why. So, that's not a real warm and fuzzy movie, necessarily, and thank you for all you like the more irreverent, frothy stuff that I've done, but to give it a chance to wrap my arms around something like that is something you can't turn down. So I said, yes, I'm on board. We worked in Vietnam in 2001 from about early spring all the way until late summer. The studio work was done in Vietnam. And we had the cooperation from Hanoi. The Vietnamese communist government, they were our collaborators. Sometimes infiltrators, not always, probably. I mean, they were censors, but still, we had this story. It says hell, and it took immense courage to do that. The movie was completed in 2001, at the end of the year. It was 2001. I'm gonna have to look this up, forgive me, but what I'm about to tell you is that it was a Miramax picture. There was a garden variety screening for an audience reaction that was in New Jersey on a Monday night to find out, how's the movie playing. Maybe you've been to some of the screenings where you know about them, just to gauge the reaction and give notes, basically. So Philip and other producers were waiting for, I think they had a 9 o'clock meeting at Tribeca, at the Miramax offices in New York. And Harvey was Weinstein, but he was running late. So they're standing around out front waiting for Harvey to show up for their 9 o'clock meeting. Now, that screening happened on Monday, September 10th. They saw the whole thing. They saw the whole thing. Just logistically, they had to escape using the West Side Highway. So suddenly, imagine your film, which as a novel is not favorable towards American foreign policy, as it were. Some say even a handbook on how to overtake a country diplomatically. This is your movie. What do you do? Well, the filmmaker, the artist like Philip would say, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to go forward. Fear no art. Well, whose boss, who is a mogul, and is your boss, says, no. His words, I'm not going to do what's wrong for the American people. He said that. I was in this year, I heard him say it. And I don't know what that means exactly, but it meant that movie is going to get sold down the river, or it's going to get put on the auction block, or in those days it's going to go to the elephant's graveyard, or straight to video, as it was known. And it's stagnated for a full year. You don't need to have me fill in what happened since then. We've all lived it, we live it now. And then a piece, I want to say it was the Washington Post, I think, was an op-ed piece was written called Let the Quiet American Speak. Word got out that this very famous novel was made into an adaptation that wasn't like the jingoistic one that they did in the 50s. They did. With Bonnie Marshall, I think. And it had sat on ice, and this groundswell of support where people were saying, we want to know why you're hiding this movie from us. We're not little children. We don't want to be told to eat our vegetables or whatever. Let us know. The film was taken to the Toronto International Film Festival the following year. They supported it, to say the least. I wasn't at the screening, but they gave it enough ovation to prove its worth in the marketplace. And this is the part when it kind of makes your head spin a little bit, because let me get this straight. You didn't want the movie to come out because you thought that it would, I don't know, somehow cause harm to the way that we are thinking about what's going on in the world, because it's a reflection of sorts of what happened before, a warning about don't let this happen again. But it's actually a legitimate film that has a very specific voice that's in the title of it. And that film was being recognized for Oscar consideration. Well, you better believe the studio suddenly was playing a completely different tune. Get behind it. Make it cause célèbre. Harvey told me something like, I want you to vilify me to the press. What? Sir? I don't do that. Harvey. His point was, he wanted to sell his movie. Now that he learned that there was an appetite, an audience for it. It was, the long story I've just told you, really comes to more of a whimper and not a bang. Yeah, Michael was nominated for an Oscar that year. That was 2003. I say this without judgment. The U.S. ground forces were rolling into Iraq, I believe, earlier than that, but 3 or 4 days earlier, I think, was the shock and awe strike. America was quite concerned. The Academy told its members, don't come in black tie, wear business attire that year. I guess that was their sensibility to somehow show deference to the world events. I don't know. I don't know why, but it did. And that was also the very same year that those of you who watched that broadcast remember Michael Moore declaring that we live in fictitious times underneath a fictitious president, and the place was like a beehive that just got kicked in that house. And for all the reasons why, from whatever your belief system is, it did. It was tumultuous. Michael didn't get the Oscar, Adrian did. It was a picture book moment.
Yes, Adrian kissing another man's wife. Come to think of it. Sorry for that. But, the movie went away, and movies went on. And here we are, many years later, and I wonder, is this film relevant today as it was at that time? Not to rub our noses in it, wag a finger, or tell us there's a better way or you've done something incorrect or wrong, but more as a mirror, the very same one that I believe, and I believe in you as the next generation of filmmakers, are holding that mirror up. What comes with mirrors? Smoke. Smoke and mirrors make movies. It's why we're there. It's a powerful medium, and I know I'm getting the wrap up here, and Ross has been fantastic in my career. I am remiss in not acknowledging that when I sat down. Twilight of the Bullets was a film that was featured prominently by what was then the tiny acorn of the Sundance Film Festival that has since come on, grown to a forest of many oaks. I think that year they were sponsored by Alpo, now it's Maserati, right? Stay with it. The festival that you guys are a part of, that you've invited me to take this film that I was lucky enough to be a part of and to show, I hope will have us asking all of the thorny questions, the important ones. And I don't know if it's going to offer up any solutions, but that's your job as artists, as filmmakers, as writers. Oh, Michael, I could use a cup of coffee. Stay with it. Have courage. I thank you so much for my time.